I shouldn't have moved into that apartment. The moment I walked through the door, something didn't feel right. The air was thick, heavy, almost suffocating. I brushed it off at first, thinking it was just the stale smell of an empty unit. But that feeling stayed with me, like the weight of something lingering in the shadows. My name is Jason, by the way. I'm not the type to believe in ghosts or supernatural stuff. But what happened in that apartment I can't explain. And I'm telling you this because I need to get it out, to make sense of it. The apartment building was old, real old, with creaky floors and peeling wallpaper. The elevator barely worked, but I didn't mind the stairs. I had just come from a broken relationship and a job that left me mentally drained. I thought moving into a cheap place in the city would give me a fresh start. The first night, I was alone, unpacking some boxes. I had barely finished setting up the furniture when I started hearing noises. I'd like to say I was just tired or imagining things, but no, it was unmistakable. Footsteps, soft, slow, deliberate, and they weren't coming from above or below. They were coming from within the walls. I froze. My heart pounded. I told myself it was just the house settling, but the sounds grew louder, as if something or someone was pacing back and forth behind the drywall. I checked the room, turned on all the lights, but there was nothing there. The sounds continued, always in the same spot. It was only the beginning. The days after the first night were the worst. At first, I convinced myself it was just the weird old building settling. But every night, without fail, the footsteps started up again. The pacing behind the walls, slow and steady, like something was trapped. One evening, I came home late, exhausted from work. The apartment felt colder than usual, even though the thermostat was set to a comfortable temperature. As I walked through the front door, I noticed something odd. There was a slight crack in the corner of the hallway, near the kitchen. I hadn't seen it before. I went to inspect it. It wasn't a crack in the wall. It was a gap, just wide enough for something to slip through if it wanted to. I felt an unsettling chill crawl up my spine. The footsteps started. This time they were quicker, more urgent. I felt like something was toying with me, taunting me, but I couldn't find the source. I tried to call the landlord. His name was Robert, though I wasn't sure he'd answer. He was a weird guy, always distant, never really around when I had questions. But that night, to my surprise, he picked up. "Hey, Robert," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm hearing something in the walls. Footsteps. Do you know what's going on with this building? It's like something's moving inside the walls." There was a long pause before he spoke. His voice was strange, strained, like he was holding something back. "Listen, Jason," he said, his voice low, almost a whisper. "Just don't go digging around. Don't investigate. You'll regret it." I didn't understand what he meant, but I felt a pang of fear. "What's going on here? What do you mean?" He hung up. I stood there, staring at the phone, confusion and fear gnawing at me. My instincts told me to leave, but something deep inside me wanted to understand what was happening. That night, the footsteps got louder, closer. Then, just as I was about to turn off the light and try to sleep, I saw it, a shadow moving across the wall in the hallway. It was tall, thin, and somehow twisted, like it was stretching in unnatural ways. It passed by the crack in the wall and then vanished into the darkness. I could barely breathe. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't move. I was paralyzed, rooted to the spot. The shadow wasn't a trick of the light. I knew that now, and it was coming for me. Couldn't sleep that night. I kept my lights on, heart racing, waiting for that shadow to return. But nothing happened. The house was eerily silent, as if it were holding its breath. But the next morning, I found something. It was a note, a small piece of torn paper, lying on the floor by the kitchen sink. I don't know how it got there, because I was sure I hadn't left anything behind when I went to bed. I bent down and picked it up. The handwriting was messy, frantic. It read, "It knows you're here. It doesn't want you here." I felt sick. My stomach turned as I reread the words over and over. Who wrote this? Why was it left for me? I rushed out to get some fresh air, trying to shake the feeling of dread, but it clung to me like a second skin. The entire day, I felt like I was being watched. I couldn't shake the sensation that someone, was always just out of view. That night I stayed in. I wasn't about to go out and leave the apartment unprotected. It was getting to the point where I wasn't sure what was real anymore. The footsteps started again. This time they were different, more erratic, faster. I heard what sounded like scratching, like claws dragging across the walls. I grabbed my phone, my hands shaking. I texted Robert, asking him again what was going on. This time he didn't respond. I called him. No answer. I couldn't wait any longer. I had to know what was happening in this apartment. I had to find out what was behind the wall. With trembling hands, I moved the couch aside, the floorboards creaking under my weight. I found the spot where the gap was widest, and I started pulling at the old drywall. The sound of the scraping seemed to echo louder than it should, like the walls themselves were protesting. And then I found it. A door. A small, hidden door, barely big enough for a person to crawl through. My heart stopped. There was no way this was part of the original design. The apartment didn't have a crawl space. Before I could even react, the door opened by itself. The smell that came through was suffocating, rotting, like something long dead. A low hum filled the air, and I could hear faint whispers, as though dozens of voices were murmuring from the other side. I should have closed it, locked it, left the building. But something I can't explain made me step forward. The door opened wider, as if inviting me in. And that's when I saw it. A figure, hunched over in the darkness, its face twisted in agony, its eyes wide and unblinking, staring straight at me. It reached out a hand. I should have run. I should have slammed the door shut, bolted out of that apartment, and never looked back. But instead, I stood there, frozen, staring at that thing in the darkness. It wasn't human. Couldn't be. Its skin was ashen and slick, stretched thin across its bones. Its fingers, long, too long, twitched, as if they were trying to crawl across the air toward me. I couldn't move. My body refused to listen, like it knew deep down that whatever was behind that door wasn't meant to be seen by human eyes. The whispers grew louder. The air grew colder. A deep, unnatural chill wrapped around me, making it harder to breathe. And then, in a voice that was barely a whisper but felt like it was scratching at my soul, it spoke. "Help me." The words sent a jolt of fear through me, but I couldn't tear myself away. I stared at its face. The gaunt, hollow eyes, the twisted mouth that stretched unnaturally wide as it whispered those words again. "Help me." I don't know why I asked, but I couldn't stop myself. How can I help you?" The figure's hand twitched again, but this time it moved closer, emerging from the darkness. Crawled, dragging itself toward me. A low, growling noise bubbled up from its throat. It reached out, fingers almost grazing my arm. "Get out." The voice was no longer a whisper. It was a guttural growl, like something trying to tear itself from the depths of the earth. The temperature dropped even more, and the room became unbearably still. I could feel it, something thick and suffocating pressing against me. That's when I heard it, the sound of footsteps, coming from behind me, from the hallway. I whirled around, heart racing, but there was nothing there. Just the darkness, just the cold. The thing, no, whatever it was, continued to inch closer, its gaze locked on mine. It was almost like it was pleading, desperate. And then, I realized something. It wasn't trying to hurt me. It was trying to warn me. As its hand finally brushed against my shoulder, a flood of images hit me all at once, like I was drowning in them. I saw the history of this apartment, the people who had lived here before me. None of them had stayed long, and none of them had left in one piece. They had all encountered the same thing. The thing behind the wall. The thing that wasn't just a thing. It was a presence. It fed on fear, on souls, on the ones who dared to stay. And it wasn't finished with me yet. I tore myself away from its touch, falling backward onto the floor. My head was spinning, the weight of the images overwhelming me. I had to leave, I had to get out, but something inside me screamed that if I ran, it would follow. The whispers grew louder again, but this time, they weren't just from the figure. They were coming from all around me, from the walls, from the very air. They were filling my ears, suffocating me. "Get out," they repeated louder and louder. "Get out before it's too late." And then, the door slammed shut, leaving me in complete darkness. The apartment was silent again, but I could still feel it. It was still there, waiting. I didn't know how long I lay there in the dark, heart pounding, hands shaking, gasping for air. Time seemed to stretch endlessly as I tried to make sense of what had just happened. The thing behind the wall, the whispers, the warnings. It felt like I was trapped in a nightmare that I couldn't wake up from. But I couldn't stay in that apartment. Couldn't. It had become a cage, and the walls were closing in. The door had slammed shut with an unnatural force, but somehow, I knew I wasn't free. The thing behind the wall wasn't done with me. I forced myself to stand, my legs weak, my mind racing. My phone was still in my hand, but my fingers fumbled, unable to dial. The idea of leaving, of running away, filled me with a sense of dread I couldn't shake. But what choice did I have? I couldn't stay in that apartment any longer. The moment I opened the door to the hallway, the temperature dropped. It was so cold, it was like stepping into a freezer. But I had to leave, had to get out of there before whatever was in that apartment consumed me too. As I reached for the stairwell, I saw it again. That shadow moving quickly, almost too fast for my eyes to follow. It darted past the edge of the hallway, flickering like a candle flame in the wind. I froze. The shadow was no longer just a shape in the corner of my eye. It was tangible. It was real. "Leave now," a voice whispered. But it wasn't the same voice as before. It was clearer, sharper, colder. I spun around, heart pounding, breath quickening. The hallway was empty, but I knew it was right behind me. I bolted for the stairs, my legs pumping, my body screaming for me to run faster. But as I reached the landing, I felt it. Something grabbed my ankle, yanking me backward. I screamed, desperately trying to free myself, but it was too strong. The shadow had me. It pulled me down the hallway, dragging me toward the apartment. "Let me go!" I screamed, but no sound escaped my mouth. The walls seemed to close in around me, the very air thick and suffocating. The shadow's grip tightened, and I could feel something cold and slimy running along my skin. The whispers were everywhere now, deafening. "You should have left when you had the chance," they hissed. Just as I thought I couldn't take it anymore, I heard something distant but familiar, a sound of rushing water. I wasn't sure how I knew, but in that moment I understood. The apartment wasn't just haunted. It had been built on an old, abandoned sewer system, a system that had been sealed off long ago. The presence that haunted it, the thing that had been behind the wall, wasn't just bound to the apartment. It was tied to something deeper. I had to get out. I had to find the exit, the way to escape whatever it was that was trying to drag me back. With a burst of adrenaline, I wrenched my leg free, stumbling toward the exit. I could still feel the cold fingers brushing against my skin, but I didn't stop. I didn't dare look back. As I pushed through the front door, the freezing wind hit me like a slap to the face. The night air was a shock to my system, but I couldn't stop now. I didn't stop until I was out on the street, breathless and shaking. I didn't look back at the apartment. I didn't want to know if it was still there, waiting. But as I stood there in the cold, gasping for air, I realized something. The apartment wasn't just haunted by a ghost. It was haunted by something much worse, something ancient, something that had been waiting. And it knew my name. It's been weeks now, and I can't shake the feeling that something is still following me. I thought leaving that apartment would give me peace, but that thing, whatever it was, isn't done with me. I know it. I feel it. It's always just outside of my sight, like a shadow lingering in the corners of my vision. After I left that night, I packed my things in a frenzy, almost running from the building without a second glance. I found a new place, far away from the city, in a quiet neighborhood where I could pretend none of it had happened. But even now, even here, I can't escape it. I've started seeing things. Sometimes, when I'm alone in my apartment, I'll catch a glimpse of a shadow crossing my living room, or hear whispers just out of earshot. It's like that presence has followed me, like it knows where I am. The worst part is that I don't think I'm the only one it's been after. I spoke to the landlord a few days after moving out. Robert hadn't responded to my calls at first, but when I finally managed to reach him, his voice sounded different, almost tired, worn out. "Jason," he said, "you don't know the whole story. You don't know what's behind those walls. It's not just an apartment. It's a trap. It's been waiting for the right person, and when it finds them, it takes everything. It takes their soul." I asked him what he meant, but he didn't answer. Instead, he just hung up. I tried to contact the previous tenants of the apartment, but no one responded. Every number I found was disconnected or the person had vanished. I think they knew something. I think they were trying to warn me. But now, I'm not sure if I'm being paranoid or if it's real. Is it the stress of what happened? Or is there something more to it? Why am I hearing those whispers? Why do I feel like I'm being watched every single second of every day? And then last night it happened again. I woke up to the sound of scratching. Faint, but unmistakable, like claws dragging against wood. I immediately froze, my heart hammering in my chest. It was so familiar. The footsteps, the whispers, that thing from the apartment. Couldn't breathe. I was paralyzed with fear, my body refusing to move as I listened to the noise grow louder, closer. The door to my bedroom creaked, just slightly. I wasn't sure if I should look. I wasn't sure if I even wanted to see what it was. But my curiosity, my dread, compelled me to slowly turn toward the door. And there it was, standing in the doorway. The figure was different now. It wasn't just a shadow, but a shape, a mass of twisted limbs, eyes glowing faintly in the dark. It was no longer hidden behind the walls. It was here, in my apartment, in my life. It raised one of its long skeletal arms toward me, and in a voice that made my blood run cold, it said, "You can't hide from me. You belong to me now." I ran, stumbling, falling, crashing through the door and into the hallway, but I couldn't escape it. It was everywhere now. And as I write this, I'm not sure how much longer I have. The figure, whatever it is, hasn't left me. It haunts my every step, my every breath. If you're reading this, don't make the same mistake I did. Don't move into that apartment. Don't ignore the whispers. And whatever you do, never, ever go behind the walls. Because once it finds you, there's no way out. I can't run anymore. The thing, whatever it is, has me trapped. I don't know how much longer I have left, but I can feel it closing in on me. I can feel it breathing down my neck, even as I sit here, typing this out in a desperate attempt to leave some trace of what happened. Something, anything that proves I existed, that I wasn't just another name lost to whatever that thing is. I thought I had escaped when I left that apartment. I thought that once I was out of that cursed place, the darkness would stop following me. But I was wrong. It never left. It was always here, just waiting, patient. It bided its time, slinking through the cracks, slipping into my life when I least expected it. The whispers are louder now, constant. At first, they were soft, like a breeze in the distance, something you could ignore. But now they're like a chorus in my ears, taunting, begging, screaming. I tried to reach out to people, tried to get help, but I couldn't get anyone to believe me. When I told people what had happened, they just brushed it off. They told me it was all in my head, that I was stressed, that I needed to move on. But I know the truth now, and the truth is terrifying. This thing, this presence, is ancient. It's not just confined to the apartment I rented. It's part of something much bigger. I dug deeper, tried to uncover the history of the building, and that's when I found the journal, hidden in a locked drawer in the landlord's office. The journal belonged to Robert. I don't know how long he had been keeping it, but I wish I never read it. In his own scrawled handwriting, he described the apartment as a feeding ground. It was never meant to be a home. It was designed to lure people in, to trap them. Robert had known about the thing in the walls. He had been its keeper for years, and every tenant, every person who dared to live there, had been a sacrifice. The worst part? It was never about the building itself. The apartment was just a gateway, a door. a place where the thing could move between worlds. And it was waiting for me, waiting for someone with enough fear to feed it, to let it grow stronger. The journal ended with one last, terrifying line. Once it has chosen you, it will never let you go. It will never stop. It doesn't need a body to follow. It only needs your fear. I thought I was safe when I left, but now I know the truth. The thing behind the walls didn't just want my soul. It wanted my terror. My fear was the key that kept it alive, the key that kept it from fading away into the nothingness. And now it has me. I see it every night. It stands just at the edge of my vision, its glowing eyes watching me, waiting for me to break. I know I'm not going to survive this. I know that whatever happens, it's already too late. So, if you're reading this, take my warning seriously. Don't go looking for it. Don't try to find that apartment. Don't tempt fate. If you do, it will find you. And once it does, there's no escaping it. You can run, you can hide, but you can never outrun fear. And that is exactly what it feeds on. I'm not sure how much longer I have before it comes for me. I don't know if I'll wake up tomorrow or if I'll be swallowed whole by the darkness. But I hope this is enough of a warning. It's waiting, and it will find you.